Hello, everybody. Those of you who are joining me this evening, thank y'all for joining me on a late night Saturday Night Live. So you could be anywhere else in the world right now, but you're here hanging out with me. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. I wanted to go live and have this conversation that has been on my mind for a little bit now. And I was hoping I can go live tonight with my friend Chuck Littleton. Unfortunately, he will not be joining me this evening, but hopefully tonight I can just scratch the surface of this particular subject, and then sometime, hopefully early next week, I can bring him in and we can go in deeper on this particular topic. But I feel like it's a conversation that needs to be had because heretofore there hasn't been sensible people having the conversation. There's people who you would think are sensible because they're very articulate, very intelligent, but their framework of history is so skewed and so misinformed that their opinion cannot completely be trusted, if that makes sense. And hopefully what I'm saying will make sense before long as we advance in this topic this evening. So I put up a poll and I asked a question of if whether you believe the FBI should be abolished. And so far, it looks like most people say yes, that the FBI should be abolished. And I think that this is becoming one of those bipartisan things where both Democrats and Republicans believe that the FBI should be abolished. What do I think about this particular topic? What say I about the answer to this question? My answer might surprise some of you, but if you have followed me up until this point, it probably won't surprise you. I'm not sure what Chuck's opinion is or answer is to this particular question, but I think I can pretty much guess what his opinion on it is, because him and I seem to be similar in terms of our philosophical conclusions as it relates to government and governance. And so I think I know what his opinion is, but I'm very much looking forward to having that conversation with him. So let's see what comments we have so far on this particular topic. So those of you who are answering the poll, saying yes or no, please elaborate if you don't mind. You can say whether you said yes or no, and then tell me why or why not. Why do you believe or disbelieve that the FBI should be abolished? Before we get into the conversation, I see. Oh, really? How are you this evening? They said they'll be right back. So, Larry Smith, I'm here for it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Appreciate the eyeballs. Let's see. We have Donna Hanson. Says hit that like button, family. Yeah, please hit that like button. I probably won't be here for long. I'll probably be here for like an hour, give or take. This is going to be more of a free form kind of chat, getting engagement from you guys and, kind of going back and forth, because this is a conversation. I don't claim to have all the answers. I just have an opinion, and my opinion happens to be informed by things that I've researched, things that I've seen, things that I've come to know to be true. And it's for that reason that I want to have this conversation this evening. Leatherface says, thank you, Chad. I'm designing, so I'll be listening. Let's see. I'll be listening and creating. Cool. Glad to have you here this evening. Leatherface says, I said yes because who is policing the FBI? That's a good question. Who is policing the FBI? Well, in theory, the Congress is supposed to be policing the FBI, as they are supposed to be policing all of the government bureaus. Am I pronouncing that right? So they're supposed to, right? The question is, are they adequately policing not only the FBI but all these other government agencies? Because we have this word bureaucracy, and the word bureaucracy insinuates, or those who use it seem to be of the opinion that it's not the Congress that are policing the bureaus or keeping them in check, Rather, it's the bureaus and the agencies who are running the show, as far as our government is concerned. So our government's not run by Congress. It's not run by the executive, judicial, and the congressional or legislative branches. Rather, it's run by the government agencies and bureaucrats. That's the running opinion. Again, and it's an opinion that's shared by both the left and the right. So what's really going on? I believe that more than anything, more than the bureaus, more than every time I say that, I don't feel like I'm saying it right, but we'll just skip right past that. But not so much the bureaus or the Congress or those who are elected officials, as it were. I tend to be of the opinion that it's typically the donors, the financiers, if you will, who are really running the show, the hidden money, so to speak, because money talks, right? And the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of people who want power, and it's very difficult in a republic to just, come in and force the people to give you power. You can't do that in a republic such as ours. You have to move a little bit more covertly. You have to move a little bit more clandestinely, if you will. And so it's for that reason that you have a lot of things that are going on at the surface that seems organic, that seems that seems to be reminiscent of a populist or a public opinion, as it were, but rather these are things that are a kind of catalyst or vehicle, if you will, a Trojan horse to empower these people all the more, to empower these kind of puppets all the more that are creating a kind of free-flowing system of what am I trying to say? I probably should have thought out what I wanted to say there before I just started talking, and I'm seeing all these comments roll in, so I'm distracted by that as well. So I'll get back to that point I was about to make. I'll pick up on these comments. I told myself that I'll read a comment, give a quick opinion, and move on, but I'm doing that thing where I get stuck on one comment and just rant for 15 minutes. So let's see here. We have O-Dog, but not from Menace, says, abolish the Fed, but I'll settle for TSA. You like the TSA? You like being patted down by the TSA at the airport? Let's see. Oh, really? It needs to be restructured, not eliminated. Let's see. Sarah Barra, 45, says, or Sarah Barra. I said Sarah Barra. Sarah Barra says, I don't know what they've actually accomplished that's good. It seems like they basically initiate activist events to stir up stuff, and every time there is shooting, the FBI knew about it beforehand. Is that the FBI or the CIA that does that? Genuine question. Not trying to prove a point. Let's see. Donna Hansen says, I said yes because of one time they worked for the common good. Now they work against it. Okay, that's an interesting comment. Let's see. Whatever Man 13 says, abolished due to abuse of power, biases that are left leaning. I can't read tonight. Lack of accountability, not effective in terrorist attacks, and there are already a lot of Fed agencies already. There are a lot of Fed agencies already, but I think when it comes to investigative agencies, the FBI is the oldest, is it not, or one of the oldest? And so why is it that the FBI? Why is it that the FBI must go, and why not some of these other investigative or agencies? Genuine question. Again, not trying to prove a point. My proving of a point will come later, but I'm just getting feedback from you all. Leatherface again says, the money runs the world. Yep, sure does. Vintage Goods 1561 says, Willie, don't toss out the baby with the bathwater. Oh, Willie is his name. Vintage Goods 1561 or 1551 Willie. Don't toss out the baby with the bathwater. And then let's see. Ransom Network Engineer says, was there truth that JFK planned to abolish the CIA? I don't know. Maybe that's a Chuck question. Miss Ree 07 says, hey, Chad O. Jackson and CTTC fam. And then let's see. Larry Smith again says, agreed. Reconstructed, not abolish. Reconstructed, not abolish. Okay. So some of you believe that the FBI, well, it seems like most of you believe it should be either abolished outright or rebuilt from the ground up. Now, rebuilt from the ground up is a Vivek Ramaswamy kind of talking point as of late. So let me ask you all this. What do you think the function of the FBI is or should be? What do you think the function of the FBI is or should be? And while you guys are answering that question, I'm going to pull up the poll to see how we're doing. 91% says yes, or 88, 89. Okay, so it's going up and down. But the overwhelming majority of you believe that the FBI should be abolished, which is very interesting, especially for this crowd. I thought or assumed that you guys would be in agreement with me in saying no, that it shouldn't be abolished. But that's okay. I oftentimes find myself having a minority opinion on most things. So, but I'm going to explain why. So let's see here. Hey, Chad O. Jackson, I already read that. Larry Smith, I already read that. Leatherface, hypothetically, someone like Soros could be running the FBI. Hypothetically, yes. I think that Soros has a lot of influence in American government, no doubt. Is he running the FBI secretly? Is he pulling the strings behind the sitting FBI director? I don't know. I would say no. I would say no. But does he influence decisions that are happening in the FBI and other government agencies? I wouldn't put it past him. I genuinely wouldn't put it past him, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that he is the one who's behind the FBI without having any facts or evidence to prove that, because that will be reckless. Let's see here. Each agency has their own investigators. The FBI is unnecessary. Okay. Misery. Okay. All right. So let's get into the show. So kind of, it seems like you all are all kind of beating the same drum. You are all kind of going down the same current, as it were, and seem to be in one accord as it relates to the question of whether the FBI should be abolished. Some of you think it should be abolished outright. Others of you think that it should be reformed. Is that a fair word? Reformed? I think I would agree with the latter, that it should be reformed. And there should be a kind of getting back to the basics of what the FBI is and what it's meant to do. So I will say that. But should it be abolished? My short answer is no. And we're going to get into why. And we're going to get even deeper into why the next time I go live with Chuck Littleton. Let's see. He is Blanchard. These agencies aren't bad. It's just how they're used. I would agree with that as well. Blanche, by the way, if you want to come on, I'll give you the link. I know this is kind of last minute, so if you want to come on, I'll be happy to give you the link. So when it comes to just text me. Just text me yes or no. If you say yes, I'm going to send you the link. If not, then I'll just keep it rolling. So should the FBI be abolished? I would say no. And I will follow that up with a question for you all. And that question is, does a nation have a right to protect its constitutional framework from domestic plots to subvert public opinion against said framework? I'll ask you again. I know that's a very wordy question, but does a nation, think about this, does a nation have a right to protect its constitutional framework from domestic plots to subvert public opinion against said framework? Now, I believe that a young Ronald Reagan would say, no, it doesn't. How do I know that? Well, during the the McCarthy hearings back in the 50s, I think it was. It was either the 40s or when was it? 40s or 50s? Somewhere in that era. Ronald Reagan, who was young, who was an actor, was brought in for questioning. And let's see here. So he was brought in for questioning. And he was asked about, okay, he said yes. Good. Let me send you the link then. Stand by, y'all. All right, so I just sent Blanche the link. Let me make sure it's the right one. 57525. Yes, that's not. Okay. So I sent him the link. All right, so again, I'm going to ask the question one more time because it probably doesn't make sense. It's very wordy. I understand that. But you guys are intelligent, so you probably got it the first time. There's probably no need for me to ask it 3 times. But I'm going to ask you again. Does a nation have a right to protect its constitutional framework against domestic plots? So think your communists, think your neo-Nazis, think your globalists and whomever, those who seek to undermine the Constitution and seek to do so through agitation, through propaganda, through church bombings, right? Through all these different clandestine, sinister, covert operations, right? Does a nation have a right to protect its constitutional framework against domestic, those who are here already, domestic enemies who seek to subvert that framework? Does it have a right to do that? So again, let's go back to Ronald Reagan. So Ronald Reagan, young actor, was asked a similar question. He was asked, should America undergo efforts to stop communists, to stop the spread of communism here in the United States? And his answer was, no, I don't think we should, because the American people will stop communism from spreading. The American people will step up in the name of patriotism, and they'll stop this communist demon from spreading. They will say no to it. They'll reject it. So he put a lot of faith and confidence in the American people. But boy, was he wrong. Because what he failed to take into consideration is the fact that your kids are subliminally being indoctrinated to be accepting of communism by another name, right? This was already happening in the public school system, and it's only gotten worse and worse over the decades on into today. And so he underestimated just how serious the communists were. He underestimated just how serious these people were. He probably at that point in his career have not read the prison notebooks from Antonio Gramsci. He probably had no idea who Herbert Marcuse was. He probably had no idea what John Dewey and his contingent were really up to. He probably had no idea about Trotsky tactics of cultural manipulation and demoralization, a slow march through the institutions. He probably had no idea about these things. How people can be so rewired up there in the mind to where they are embracing and accepting of Marxian policies without realizing that they are, in fact, Marxian policies. And so if the people can't fight against communism themselves because they're indoctrinated in such a way to where they're embracing of it and accepting of it, what other mechanisms do we have in place as a country to safeguard our Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic, who wish to subvert it and undermine it and replace it with a kind of globalist constitution, or a constitution that lays the groundwork for globalism? You see, people like J. Edgar Hoover, the long time serving director of the FBI. I've heard both Republicans and Democrats speak ill of Mr. J. Edgar Hoover because he went after people like Martin Luther King, and he spied on this person and spied on that person. You see, in order to make such a criticism, one must first believe that people like FBI or people like Martin Luther King was a good guy. He only wanted equality. He only wanted peace and stability in the land. That's all he wanted. He only wanted for the races to come on. That's all he wanted. He didn't want, segregation and this and that. No, he wanted world peace. This is the only thing that Martin Luther King was asking for. And J. Edgar Hoover, vicious racist that he was, I can't even talk tonight. J. Edgar Hoover, vicious racist he was, tried to stop that. He wanted Negroes in chains. If it were up to him, he would send all the blacks back into slavery. That's the kind of running narrative that a lot of us have, Republican and Democrat. And it's for this reason that we look at people like J. Edgar Hoover as the villain and Martin Luther King as a good guy. Never mind the fact that in his day, in the 60s, well, his day preceded the 60s, but he was still around in the 60s. His approval rating was significantly higher than Martin Luther King's, who J. Edgar Hoover called the most notorious liar in America. And he was. That's a fact. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. You have the truth and you have lies. Martin Luther King often chose lies. You can't say, well, what he meant was no. It's either true or it's false. When you knowingly say something that's false, that's called a lie. Martin Luther King was a deceiver. His whole image was to deceive. He didn't believe in the God of the Bible, didn't believe the words of the Bible, but yet he masqueraded as a Christian pastor, as a reverend. He basked in such compliments of the moral leader of our day without any kind of pushback. So yes, he was a notorious liar. And so when I look at someone like a J. Edgar Hoover, I don't agree with everything that he did. I don't agree with everything that he said. But I feel like he was a patriot. He just was. Again, I know that's an unpopular opinion to say in this day and age, but it's a fact. J. Edgar Hoover was a patriot. And we have to ask ourselves, well, if we all agree that the Constitution is worth preserving, if it's worth preserving, if it's worth conserving, then are we willing to implement and undergo efforts to protect it when we see something happening? You know what I mean? Because the thing is, the FBI, like it or not, is privy to information that the average American doesn't have. They just are. You can disagree with, the way they go about this and the way they go about that. You can disagree with that all you want. But they're privy to information that the average American doesn't have. And so, with that being the case, it begs the question of, did they know something about Martin Luther King that most of us don't know? Did they? And if the answer to that question is yes, the question becomes, well, what is it? What did they know that we don't know? You see, people don't understand this about J. Edgar Hoover, but he got his start in, as far as his career is concerned, by investigating radical movements in the United States and who their connections were to. He was successful in initiating a plan to round up a bunch of communist radicals way back, I think in the 1920s or something like that, and deporting them. He was responsible for overseeing this. So he knew full well who these radicals were, what their agenda was, what they were all about, and he oversaw efforts to deport them. At least those of them who were foreign, those of them who were imported to the United States from such places as the Soviet Union. So that's important to take into consideration. He dedicated the better part of his career to investigating these communist plans to demoralize America and investigating who these people were, what they were up to, and to some extent putting a halt to these plans before they got really bad. That's what he was up to. Now we can get into the legalities and the efficacy and all of the different red tape of what he did and how he did it throughout the 60s. But the fact of the matter is, if not for J. Edgar Hoover, we wouldn't know the man that Martin Luther King really was. The fact that he was a serial adulterer and drug user and rapist and all the things. We wouldn't know any of that information. We will continue to go with the okie doke of this lie that he was the moral leader of the 1960s who changed America for the better. Now, someone like me, those of you who have heard me speak a time or two, know that when it comes to somebody like Martin Luther King, I don't spend a lot of time talking about the kind of nefarious things that he did behind closed doors with the prostitutes and the drugs and all that. You may have heard me mention that once or twice, but I don't lead with that when it comes to my criticism of the legacy of Martin Luther King. I'll talk more about the fact that he was a deceiver as far as his pastoralship is concerned, and that he genuinely believed in Marxist ideology more so than he believed in the Bible. He took more seriously Mao's Red Book and the Communist Manifesto. He took that more seriously than he did the words of the Bible. In fact, he did a whole sermon right after he got out of college where he went through point by point of what Christians believed, and he rejected it. He rejected the second coming of Christ, said that that's scientifically impossible, that it can't happen. But, there's something to learn from the myth, was his take on it. He looked at, again, various different components of what Christians believed, dismissed them, said that it's not real. This isn't based in fact. Here's what we now believe as a modern man, because we rely more on science. This is what we believe. And he wasn't saying this kind of like, well, this is what they believe over there and this is what they believe over there. No, he included himself in the quote unquote scientific community. And I can share the link with you all because this is available. I didn't have to dig to find it. No, it's readily available. This stuff is in plain sight. But most of us are more willing to go along with the narrative that we were taught in our schools than we are in investigating the facts ourselves. J. Edgar Hoover was privy to this information. Not only did he understand radicals and what they were doing in America, but he also understood Christian doctrine as well, because he gave his life to Christ at a very young age, J. Edgar Hoover. And so he was fundamentalist in his Christian belief. So he knew the difference between what a genuine Christian pastor was and what Martin Luther King was. He knew that there was a difference. I'm not saying that it's the government's job to decipher whether somebody genuinely believes in the Christian faith or not. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that when you read the Communist Manifesto and you read the fact that it's basically calling for bloodshed. The Communist Manifesto basically calls for bloodshed. I mean, the last pages of it, I think the last page of it, says something to the effect, and I'm going to butcher it, says something to the effect of, let the bourgeoisie tremble at the fact or at the rise of a proletariat or something like that. You have nothing to lose but your chains. It's calling for bloodshed and for rioting and all the things. So Hoover understood, as many of us do, that this ideology is not as simple as Republican versus Democrat, or, the Catholics versus the Protestants, or, what I mean? It's not this kind of like, well, we can disagree without being disagreeable, and we can, what I mean? It wasn't a simple kind of cordial difference in opinion. No, this is a belief in a worldview that wishes to take power by force if necessary. That's what communism is. And so, can you treat it like different parties in the United States? You have your libertarians, you have your socialists, you have your Republicans, you have these, you have those. Can it be treated just like any of these? Or should it be dealt with a kind of special attention on the basis of the fact that its founder called for violent revolution? Does a nation have a right to protect its constitutional framework against domestic attempts or efforts to subvert public opinion against said framework? I would say yes, it does. It just does. Those who say that we shouldn't have such an organization or agency as the FBI are, in a sense, saying that we should have a neutralized or neutered government. Like, what's the point in having a government that doesn't have any teeth? Of course, you don't want them to use those teeth against you. Of course, you don't want them to use their weaponry against you. None of us want that. So while it's my opinion that yes, they should have teeth, but they should also be regulated and policed by Congress, because Congress is elected by who? You, me, us. So, to the extent that the government runs afoul of hardworking, law-abiding citizens, those hardworking, law-abiding citizens should do their part in making sure that Congress hold these agencies accountable and reform them or get rid of the bad players. You see, it's easy to say abolish this or abolish that or get rid of this. By the way, I do believe that the Department of Education should be abolished. That's something I believe that should be abolished today, yesterday. Because that's something entirely different. Nowhere in the Constitution does it give the federal government the right to regulate education. Nowhere does it give the government that power at all. The federal government would do well to acknowledge the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, which says that which is not in this Constitution should be left up to the states and to the people. And so, if anything, education should be regulated, in my opinion, at the home level. But I would say that, okay, there's no reason why, if a local townspeople who are homogenous in their beliefs and culture and opinions want to utilize their tax dollars to build a local high school, they should have every right to do it. Who am I to say, no, y'all can't do that? 10th Amendment of the Constitution says they can. If it's not in the Constitution, the federal Constitution, it should be left up to who? The states and the people. Let the people govern and regulate themselves at the local level. So if you want to have a socialist system at the local level, you have every right to do so. It's when you try to federalize your socialist system that I have a problem with it. The Department of Education is an attempt to federalize socialism. It just is. But when it comes to the Constitution, I believe that the Constitution, the federal Constitution, is one of the things that made America a force to be reckoned with. And to the extent that you weaken it, that you neutralize it, that you water it down, and you make it mean, you bastardize it to make it mean something it doesn't mean. Chuck talked about this in the last Cutting Through the Culture episode, where we were talking about, what were we talking about? We were talking about, that's going to bother me. Oh yeah, FDR, and how FDR played fast and loose with the language of the Constitution to justify his socialist system that he was trying to usher in. And that's what the communists desire to do as well. And so with this being the case, in my opinion, it is necessary to have somebody in place who's responsible for understanding these movements, because we do have a First Amendment. You have the right to have socialist leanings. Like, you have a right to have an opinion of your own. But to the extent that you try to undergo an attempt to undermine the Constitution and supplant it with something else, not through the means of peaceful demonstration and all the things, but you try to do so through agitation. Again, people don't understand, when you look at a lot of these church bombings and all these different things that were going on, riots that were going on throughout the 20th century, these were means to undermine the Constitution, to basically revolutionize America, to tear it down and to build in its place something else. And they were going through. So help me get this straight. You mean to tell me that these communists and globalists and Satanists, quite frankly, should have the right to go through these kind of unorthodox means, these kind of Saul-Alinsky-esque means where they bend the rules to meet their desired end? They should have the right to do that. But the FBI, on the other hand, they should be, Sunday school in terms of the way that they go about things. They should have their hands tied behind their back and make sure that, dang, we hit this roadblock. Gee, oh golly, I guess we can't stop the communists. Again, should these agencies not have teeth? Because we sure as hell aren't doing anything as a people to stop communism. We got that wrong 70 years ago when Ronald Reagan said, yeah, democracy will figure it out. Well, democracy hasn't figured it out yet. Democracy hasn't figured it out yet. Republicans are celebrating Martin Luther King Day today. So you see how gradual and incremental and how pervasive and inundative this thing is? We're too credulous. We're too naive and gullible, which credulous, naive, gullible, they're all synonymous. They all mean the same thing. But we're so ready to believe the narrative as it's fed to us without questioning it. And if you're a Christian, you ought to know better, because the Bible tells you to test every spirit to see if it's of God. Test every spirit. We don't do any testing of any spirits. We just accept it wholesale. So I have some stuff I wanted to share with you all. Let's see here. I have a tweet. See if I can't pull this up. This is from Brianna Joy Gray. And Miss Gray, she wrote this in 2022. She says, Marjorie Taylor Greene is right. Taylor Greene is right about the FBI, bad faith or not. It's in today's radar, I argue. Or in today's radar, I argue. I guess that's her show. I argue that the left should take advantage of the right's new acknowledgement of systemic bias and push to abolish the FBI, an institution that has always protected elite power and not the people. If you haven't put it together, Brianna Joy Gray is a flaming leftist. So we know what her opinion is on whether or not the FBI should be abolished, right? We know what her opinion is. We know what Angela Davis's opinion is, because she has often opined that the FBI should be abolished. We know what Dr. Umar Johnson's opinion is. He has also opined that the FBI should be abolished. We know what, so those on the left, we know what their opinion is on the FBI, even though they would say that, yeah, the FBI, we like the fact that they're going after Trump, and we like the fact that they're going after some of the folks on the right that we don't like. They will say that in one breath, but in the next breath, they'll tell you that, yeah, the FBI should be abolished. These are people who are on the proverbial left, right? And then you have those who are on the so-called right. Sebastian Gorka, a man whose show I've been on 3 times, says that the FBI should be abolished. Dinesh D'Souza says that the FBI should be abolished. And now you have Vivek Ramaswamy, who's coming out and saying that the FBI should be abolished. I think I have a clip of him saying just that. If I can't pull it up, let's see.
One of your big applause lines that is a bit of a head scratcher for me is defund the FBI.
Yeah.
So if you
I didn't say defund the FBI. I said shut down the FBI and replace it with something new. Yeah.
So you want to shut down the FBI? What are you replacing it with?
I think it's a new apparatus built from scratch that actually respects the law instead of making it up. And the funny thing, Chuck, is if you look at over the last...
I think the FBI constantly is making up the law. That is a huge charge. They have just stopped major fentanyl. Been able to get rid of. I mean, there's a lot of work the FBI does, other than respond to complaints from elected officials who don't like investigations.
Well, actually, if you look over the course of the last 60 years, J. Edgar Hoover, what he did to Martin Luther King, that was an affront. It's still the J. Edgar Hoover FBI that people walk into down the street here in Washington, D.C. And I personally believe, as somebody who's running to actually run the executive branch of the government, when you have a bureaucracy whose culture becomes so ossified, every once in a while, you need to turn it over. And I think that, yes, we need federal law enforcement, but that institution has, in a bipartisan way, become so, I think, ossified in its own norms, in its own corruption, that we need to rebuild it from scratch and have something.
So you're going to replace the FBI with a new FBI?
Well, with a new institution built from scratch to carry out federal law enforcement, because the existing FBI, the people who work there, have worked there for so long that actually they're going to be getting in their own way. I think that that's actually important. And by the way, I also support
it does sound like you're just replacing the FBI with the FBI.
Well, the problem is there's people who have worked there for decades. And so what I say is, if I'm the U.S. president and I can't work for the federal government for more than 8 years, which I think is a good thing, then none of those bureaucrats reporting into me should either. That's the point I'm making.
Thanks for watching our YouTube.
Okay. What's up, Blanche?
What's up, man?
What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, if an institution is already set up, what will replacing the people do? If it already has guidelines, regulations, and rules, what's going to change? You just got folks, a different crops of people is going to follow the same rules. So I don't know. I think that his ideas sound communist, because my question is, people want to get rid of the FBI and replace it with what? Like, what's the replacement going to be? I just don't understand. It seems like to me, folks don't want to be held accountable. You want to be in a position of power, and you don't want some governing body that has the potential to get into your affairs and expose you or shut you down. So get rid of it altogether. It's crazy that J. Edgar Hoover has this bad rap that's pretty much believed by most of the population, but he was actually going against the demise of this country. And you made a good point. You said, he wasn't necessarily following the rules all the time. Well, my question is, Chad, how do you fight communism, though? Like how can you fight communism in the confines of American rules? Like, you couldn't, because people are allowed these certain freedoms. So how could you even fight it unless you broke the rules? You can't fight communism if there's free speech. People have a right to do this and a right to do that. So my thing is, he didn't have a choice but to do it the other way. Going the regular way wouldn't work, because in this system we have today, the communists have too much power. They're in the media, they're in the movies, they're everywhere you look. There's little subtle in school systems. Look at this book. We read this in high school.
Yeah. Right.
Why?
Right.
Why do we read this in high school? Why? For what reason? There's no reason, right? Were they trying to prepare us? They trying to give us a heads up, try to get us to not want it? I mean, like, what was the reason?
I'm surprised they didn't give y'all Mal's Red Book while they were at it.
What's funny, Chad? I watched it's based on a book, though, but it's the Animal Farm, the cartoon. I watched it on YouTube the other night. And it's crazy because the animals were disgruntled, right, on that farm that they were on. And so they started so they branched out and went to all these other farms. But what was funny was everybody's farm wasn't the same. You had some farms worse than their farms, some farms way better, but it was a mix of the farms. So it's not like, everybody experienced the same thing. And so at the end of the cartoon, I haven't read the book, but at the end of the cartoon, it was worse than what they had before.
Wait, hold on. I'm following where you're going, but y'all read the Communist Manifesto, but y'all didn't read Animal Farm in school?
I don't remember reading Animal Farm. Maybe we had, maybe I forgot, but I know we definitely read the Communist Manifesto. Definitely. We may have read Animal Farm. I don't remember it. But my point is that the alternative was worse than what they had before. Mm-hmm. Just like the alternative to integration is worse.
Right.
So the alternative to the FBI is going to be worse.
Right. Yeah. No, because I mean, my biggest point is like, am I advocating that everything that the FBI has done over the last 10 years is good? No. I mean, you're talking about an agency that's ran by humans and that is embroiled in politics, right? And so you are going to have foul players who are involved in the game. That's just with anything. So with Vivek Ramaswamy saying we should just go ahead and get rid of it and replace it with something else with new people, as if these people aren't themselves corruptible. It's like to change for the sake of change, I think is just dumb. In you know, on Meet the Press, Vivek had an opportunity to explain like, okay, what will be the difference between the FBI and this new thing that you're trying to concoct? And he wasn't able to give an answer, as smart as he is. And I was genuinely listening for an answer, and he wasn't able to give a satisfactory answer. The only thing that he was able to say was like, you have people who have been in here for decades. Like, okay, well, why not just get rid of the people that's been in there for decades? Like, why not let that be the solution? What is your purpose of getting rid of the FBI? You know what I mean? Just because. To me, I think for him, it's just a talking point, because he knows that the general sentiment of the public is that the FBI should be abolished. I mean, I have a poll right now, and the last I checked, 85% of the people watching right now believe that the FBI should be abolished. Again, this is a bipartisan opinion. Democrats and Republicans believe that it should be abolished. So I think he's playing more to a kind of populist thing, more so than actually thinking this thing through. And one of the things that he says was like, yeah, this is the same FBI that went after Martin Luther King. So he's using that term. He's using, Martin Luther King and the general public's belief that Martin Luther King was this great hero to say, yeah, they went after him. They went after a hero. So yeah, this is another reason why we should get rid of him. And it's like, well, if not for the FBI, if not for J. Edgar Hoover, I believe that we would have gotten a lot worse than what we actually ended up getting throughout the 1900s. If that makes sense. I don't know. What say you?
No, I mean, no, it makes sense because, again, the alternatives. What are the alternatives? So the FBI investigates terrorism, cyber terrorism, counterintelligence. Like, your local police can't do that. Your local detective, like what agency is going to do this? You asked a good question. You said, should a nation be allowed to protect the Constitution? My question is, the citizen is not going to do it. The average person has to work, take care of children, raise a family. There's just too much going on to worry about the Constitution. I'm sorry. So you need some people dedicated to doing it. And I mean, like you mentioned Ronald Reagan in that clip we watched, most Americans couldn't fathom what we saw over the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. They couldn't even, you couldn't have fathomed these things happening. Everybody I talked to said this would never happen in America. That was a sentiment. And so there's a certain comfort level or naivety that folks have living in this country that these things won't happen. What they don't realize, what I learned from you all, is that this communism thing had its roots or tentacles in America for decades. So it's not like somebody's going to knock on the front gate and say, let us in. It's already woven into everyday life, culture, education. It's everywhere we look, we see it everywhere. And so even the language, MLK mentioned, he said they hid it in language and they made it seem like everything that was bad was black. Well, I feel the same way about communists. Mm-hmm. They've hidden everything in language, from the word democracy to the word equity, inclusion, all of these things, equality. It's all in the language. And so now when the guy that owns the 7-Eleven, Biswick, what's his name?
Vivek Ramaswamy.
Vivek Ramaswamy. So when he gets over there and he's, think about it, his only thing as an example for why the FBI is bad is look what they did to King. That's his only example.
Right.
Everybody goes, oh yeah, they did King, they spied on King, they spied on Malcolm X, they spied on any of these other degenerates. But to my point, there's no fair way to fight communism. It's impossible.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's why I said, like, these communists, they're willing to go to any means necessary to affect their end goal. They're willing to move, again, covertly, use agitation, entice friction between two groups. They're willing to do all these things and plant sleeper cells within the government, within the FBI, and all the things. Like, these are things that they've been proven to do. But meanwhile, you expect the FBI to conduct themselves like a church choir or like Sunday school children, and not have teeth to go after these people. Like you don't have a country at that point. You know what I mean? Like, because the people have proven to be insufficient when it comes to fighting off communism. In fact, what they often do is they get tricked by the tricks of the communists. This has been proven to be a fact. We got Chuck in the house. I didn't think this was going to happen tonight, but he's here.
Man. Look, can y'all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man, listen. So yeah, like I told Chad earlier, we was planning on doing this live. We talked about it, I think, Thursday, Friday, we discussed doing this live, and yeah, I made plans to do it, but Chad, our schedules couldn't line up. So I said, nah, Chad, you go ahead and take it. I'm a little busy tonight. But I was sitting back and I was listening to Chad, breaking things down, and I just was like, man, I couldn't help it, man. I just had to. I said, let me just get this 10 minutes. Can I just get 10 minutes? Yeah, man, this is a good one here, man. In short, well, let me just cut to the chase and give you my answer straight away. The answer is unequivocally no. The FBI should not be abolished. Like I said, I'm gonna try to make this brief because I can't stay long. But yeah, I mean, you brought up some very great points there, Chad. When it comes to J. Edgar Hoover, a lot of people don't know the full history, not just of J. Edgar Hoover, but of the FBI as an institution. Of course, it sort of began, it grew out of the Secret Service. It was pretty much the brainchild, in a way, of, quite frankly, it's very ironic, because there were individuals responsible for creating the FBI who, you wouldn't necessarily think off the top of your head, oh, wow, this person is, red, white, and blue, stars and stripes, good old, Uncle Sam and all that good stuff. What really spawned or I guess evoked in the minds of a lot of people that there needed to be this kind of federal investigative force, not for the purpose of criminal prosecution, because that is a key thing to consider when you're talking about the FBI, the difference between intelligence, foreign intelligence, and criminal prosecution. And like I say, you'll get into that. Fast forward to the 1970s, when you had something called the Levi guidelines that were created by then Attorney General Edward Levy, or Levi. Okay, because what people don't realize is that the FBI over the years has not had this huge kind of omnipresent, omnipotent power like everyone assumes that the FBI has. There was a certain kind of climate that existed during the time of Edgar Hoover, but it was political. It was the political forces within our government and within our bureaucracy that was fighting tooth and nail to get rid of J. Edgar Hoover, because prior to J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI was not a political institution in that it sided with the left versus whether it sided with the right. Now, men like J. Edgar Hoover was considered to be, a right-leaning, again, because of his stance, of course, towards communism. One of the higher ups in the FBI that was close to the top was a man by the name of Bill Sullivan. Now, it is said that it was Bill Sullivan working in cahoots with the Kennedys, Bobby Kennedy especially, to try and oust J. Edgar Hoover so that they can send the FBI in a more political direction. The fact of the matter is that the FBI was for the longest time, again, of course, you're dealing with human beings. You're going to have mistakes. You're going to have, like Chad mentioned earlier, right? You're dealing with an institution that is ran by human beings, and so you're going to have, inherent within it, you're going to have ups and downs and things of that nature. But for the most part, the FBI was a very pristine in terms of its reputation and in terms of how it conducted its business. It was not this, this fantasy that we all kind of want to make it out to be. But just going back to the earlier times and why the FBI was important, and I think it is important to consider the history of the FBI, because, of course, history could be our North Star going forward, to sort of understand what could possibly happen without an FBI. The FBI, the idea of the FBI was brought upon by the assassination of President McKinley. President McKinley, for those of you who don't know, was assassinated by a man named Leon Czolgosz. Leon Czolgosz was influenced by a woman named Emma Goldman. And I think Chad even talked about how J. Edgar Hoover helped round up. They weren't, because again, something like Marxism, communism, and this was before the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, but you had this anarchist movement going on in Russia, and all over Europe, quite frankly, and you had this anarchist philosophy starting to grow and sprout in the United States as well. And Leon Czolgosz was an anarchist who was influenced by the words and by the ideas of Emma Goldman, who was eventually, I think, rounded up. And I think Chad brought this up because a lot of foreign actors, a lot of foreign anarchists, many of whom were Russian and German, etc., they were all rounded up and they were put on a ship. What was the ship called? The SS Buford, and they were all shipped out. This was as a result, and this brought up this whole big kind of much ado after McKinley was assassinated. I forgot the exact year, but the year that the FBI was officially founded, many suggest, was 1908. And it was founded because Theodore Roosevelt, the vice president to McKinley, took over once McKinley was assassinated. And I can't remember if he was the attorney general under McKinley or if he was appointed by Theodore Roosevelt. But oddly enough, the attorney general at the time was the grandnephew of Napoleon. That Napoleon Bonaparte, the man's name was Charles Bonaparte. Charles Bonaparte was essentially the mastermind behind, he was pretty much the brainchild that created the FBI, because there was no serious kind of national, I guess, a law enforcement agency essentially at the time. And a lot of people failed to realize the growing complexity of the United States in the post-industrial era in the early 1920s. You had the likes of men like Al Capone. Al Capone was a child in the early 1900s, but you had men like Babyface Nelson and Machine Gun Kelly and Bonnie and Clyde and Al Capone and John Dillinger. We've all heard these people. We've all heard these names. And it was extremely difficult for even local authorities to deal with these problems because of the kind of fractured nature of our law enforcement agencies from coast to coast. Many towns and small communities didn't even have standing law enforcement institutions. And this is what allowed for a lot of these criminals to evade capture, because they would go into these small little enclaves where they knew that there was pretty much no law enforcement presence there. And you add that on to the fact that at that time, of course, you had the Model T. The first automobile went into mass production. And then once you had that, you had this new kind of interstate commerce of an underground economy, this new interstate kind of nature of crime that we had never seen before. And so again, I can go on and on and on. I was trying to just come on and just spill real quick because, like I said, I can't stay long. But a lot of people they just do not understand the creation of the FBI was necessary at the time in the United States when the kind of growing complexity of our society had outpaced our law enforcement capabilities. And, things were really beginning to go off the rails in the early 1900s, not just on the criminal side, but I mean, you had all types of things going on from political assassinations. You had after the Bolshevik Revolution, especially in the early 1920s, you had communists. They had blew up the J.P. Morgan building in New York. They tried to assassinate Chief Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. They sent a bomb to his home. I talked about before, there was the Democrat Senator Thomas Hardwick. They sent a bomb to his home that was intercepted by his secretary that opened up the package and had her hands blown off. So these are the things that were happening. They tried to assassinate, they tried to send a bomb to John D. Rockefeller that was intercepted. And so there was a lot of stuff going on at the time. And so just, all of this crazy communist anarchist, madness didn't just begin in the 1960s. It began a lot sooner. And JFK, my goodness, J. Edgar Hoover is not the man that history makes him out to be, quite frankly. It's just not true. And even as far as, and I've seen people in the comment section talking about the rumors involving J. Edgar Hoover's sexuality and these kinds of things. And, even I've read the personal testimonies, memoirs, and biographies of people who knew J. Edgar Hoover personally. And they say they never saw anything like that. And they quite frankly don't believe it to be true. But, again, whether, J. Edgar Hoover was a homosexual or whether he liked to cross-dress in private or not, if you watch the film of J. Edgar Hoover, that Hollywood produced, J. Edgar Hoover being depicted by Leonardo DiCaprio, that's pretty much what they made the movie about. Was his sexuality and how he pretty much used communism as a ruse to spy on good men like MLK in order to get dirt on him to try and ruin his reputation. And so I just wanted to come in and just kind of give some nuggets because, I heard Chad was saying a lot and I was just chomping at the bit. But the short of it is no. And overall, guys, and I'm going to let you all finish out. What I'm seeing on the so-called conservative side of the aisle is this kind of growing utopianism that I find just very, very disheartening because we are beginning to, we've forgotten. And again, part of the reason why our FBI and other alphabet agencies have been corrupted was due a lot to the criminal justice movement of the 1960s that went part and parcel to the civil rights movement. I mean, you had a lot of stuff going on, even in when a lot of these, bombings and things like that were happening in the 1990s, all this stuff was called into question about our intelligence agencies' ability to root out terrorism and all these things. And remember Janet Reno, she, had that famous moment where she talked about this so-called wall. And the wall was about, well, what exactly can our intelligence agencies do in terms of collaborating, right, and sharing information with one another? Because a large part of the reason why a lot of this stuff was happening in the 1990s, like Oklahoma City and the first attack on the World Trade Center and all these things, at least they claim, was that our intelligence agencies were not allowed or afforded the opportunity to communicate with one another because there were certain legislative barriers placed upon these institutions that prevented them from properly communicating with one another. So what I'm saying is that there have been checks and certain barriers and impediments put in place to prevent, the FBI, CIA, and other agencies from becoming, far too powerful than we would like them to become. But the flip side of it, again, there are no solutions. There are no perfect solutions, only trade-offs. You do get these bad actors, who want to, quite frankly, like Chad is talking about and Blanche is talking about, who want to destroy your country. Mm-hmm. And so, the question is, how do you handle that? What do you do about that? And it's saying it's not an easy thing. It's not just to say, well, abolish the FBI and start a new one. That's not an answer. It's not the answer.
It's an answer. It's an answer that satisfies the populace, but it's not an answer.
Yeah. Instead of pass the populace, but and that's why I hate that term, because that can mean a myriad of different things, right, Chad? A lot of conservatives are saying, well, now since the left pretty much dominates and controls all of our institutions, well, then we don't have any choice but to just completely abolish this and abolish that and do this and do that. And like I said, I don't like the way, the FBI, the CIA, I don't like the way they've been used to, for partisan ends. I don't like it just as much as anybody else, but abolishing the FBI is certainly not the answer. It's insane.
It's silly.
It's insane.
Silly talk.
It's silly. Yeah.
Before you go though, Chuck, Orange and Slinky asked a question, and I guess they're insinuating that this is a reason why it should be abolished. They asked, well, what did it morph into though? The FBI.
Well, when you say like what did it morph into as far as like the FBI? I mean, I would say, round about like the late, 60s, early 70s. I mean, you did have, people's. Like I said, I wish I could have been around from the beginning so we could have really unpacked this. Because there have been men, we know the Alger Hisses of the world, the Harry Dexter Whites of the world, the Elizabeth Bentleys of the world, all of these Soviet agents working for the all these Soviet apparatchiks working inside the United States in order to destroy it. And I think, quite frankly, that many of them did make their way inside the FBI. Because the true battle that we face is not one of how do we construct and create the best institution or a more perfect institution. The battle that we face, of course, is ideological. And of course, it would be a cliche thing to say that we in fact are fighting a spiritual battle, because one thing that the Soviets figured out is that it wasn't so much that they had to sort of compete with us in arms, or in China today is doing the same thing. In order to get what we have and to use our developments, our technology, our inventions, our patents, and all these other things in order to, fuel their tyrannical machines, is that they need to simply wait until we accomplish something, and then they can finesse someone into turning over our secrets, because they get people in high places to buy into their dreams, to buy into their ideas. Again, and not just these foreign countries themselves, but just the whole idea and the attitude that, again, is perpetuated in the public school system and in our universities and so on and so forth, that an enlightened person, a truly enlightened person, this is the curse of rationalism, right, as an ideology. It's this idea that if an enlightened person sees a problem, it becomes their duty to try and fix it. It becomes their duty to try and make the world a better place. And so you have people in high places in these countries, in this country, and the FBI is no exception, who pretty much sees it not so much that they are betraying their country when they do these things. They're betraying their country when they try to undermine Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis, whoever politician you like or whatever, right? They don't see it as they or leaving our borders open. They don't see it that way. They see it as though they are doing something for man in a way that's going to really bring the principles of our founding into full bloom, because they are the ones who are, enlightened enough, in fact, to know what it is that needs to be done. And they are willing to make that sacrifice. And that sacrifice is to divulge into sin, like lying and thievery and even murder, worst case scenario. They'll take on the burden of sin if it means making the world a better place. Of course, because that's the true vision, right, of a true Christian, some would say, or at least, that is the true vision of someone who actually cares about people. So the FBI is no exception to that. And so again, you have those in the FBI who are, these kind of statist utopian types, and then you have those in the FBI that are actually trying to do the right thing. And it's just like it's just like any other institution. But like you alluded to earlier, Chad, this is why we have a Congress. This is why we have a legislative body, right? Who are the people that you elect? Barack Obama can sit there and appoint someone like a Brennan to be the head of the CIA, a man who of course, voted for the communist candidate for president in 1976. He turns around and leads your CIA, and Obama is the one who appoints him. And so, like you said, it is our elected representatives in the legislative body who are of course subject to the whims of the people, at least theoretically, who have oversight over these institutions. I mean, the problem, I guess I'm saying in my long-winded way, the problem is bigger than just the FBI itself. This is a kind of cultural and spiritual rot that is just permeating throughout the society. It's not just we need to abolish the FBI and abolish the CIA and these types of things. That's not how that works.
Right.
We're dealing with something far, far more vast, far, far deeper than just changing institutions on their face. It's far deeper than that. And again, I love how they, again, want to point out these bad things and, look at what this J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. No, this is not J. Edgar Hoover's FBI, because I can guarantee you, if a man like J. Edgar Hoover was still running the FBI, none of this stuff would be going on that we see today. This BL, none of this stuff would be going on. I'm sorry. Again, it wasn't until J. Edgar Hoover's death, again, and they were trying to remove him even before he passed on. And you had men close to him like Bill Sullivan, who was, again, considered to be the first liberal Democrat, so they say, that reached the top upper echelon of the FBI, because prior to Bill Sullivan, it had not been a partisan institution. But the problems are bigger than the FBI. I'm sorry.
Can y'all hear me?
I mean, it sounds a little better, but it's kind of low before.
But look, y'all, man, I just had to come and get my 2 cents.
I just wanted to say one thing. So, my thoughts were, it's almost like I mentioned about there's no fair way to really fight communism, because it's just too much to just try to do it through dotting the I's and crossing T's type of thing. But would you agree that had J. Edgar Hoover not been around, the FBI would be a total, like, could you imagine that J. Edgar Hoover not existing and then Obama having the FBI with years of no J, like, it'd be straight.
Yeah, exactly, man. Well, and that's the thing, just with everything and the way from and again, what not, like I said, not just with McKinley's assassination, the rise of organized crime, the rise of political violence, the anarchist Marxist movement in the United States, but you had other types of technological innovation, transportation, like I said, the invention of the automobile, railroads, and these things. It really connected. Yes, it connected the Union in such a way, and it made bad actors, criminal types, it made it a lot simpler and a lot easier for them to evade the law, because it just, our law hadn't caught up yet. So like I said, when the more and more we advance as a society, at least advance in some ways, you're going to have this kind of growing state, I don't want to say state apparatus, but you're going to have institutions like the FBI come about. The more and more, society becomes, I guess, more complex and more sophisticated, and human relations begin to evolve and change. And that's just the reality of it. If we didn't have someone like J. Edgar Hoover around back then manning the post, and again, it was, and the reason why J. Edgar Hoover gets this, one of the reasons why he gets this bad rap, because of the power that he wielded, was because he didn't trust many people, even inside his own bureau. So he played a lot of things close to the chest. And I'm not saying he was a perfect man. Of course, I'm not saying he didn't take liberties, that everything that he did was above board. Yeah, even the FBI had certain partnerships and relationships with organized crime. And this, it's funny. I don't know if a lot of black folks know this, but, in some instances, for example, when there were situations involving these kind of racial crimes and racial incidents with the Ku Klux Klan and others, whenever there were crimes committed against blacks by the Ku Klux Klan, a lot of time, the FBI would send members of the Italian mafia into these areas to try to investigate the crime to see if they can figure out who was behind the killing of this black man. There was one incident in particular, I'm forgetting to remember what state it happened, but one of the first government informers, I think this was before Giovalaci's testimony, there was one famous Italian mobster who was on the FBI's payroll, a man by the name of Gregory Scarpa. They called him the Grim Reaper. He was actually charged with the task in one instance, at least, to try and, infiltrate or get, use his power and influence to try and get information on the goings on inside the Ku Klux Klan. So, again, that's why I'm not saying everything the FBI does was above board. But again, when you're talking about the communist movement, it is an international criminal conspiracy. It just is. And that's even during that time beforehand, they even had a name for themselves. Again, we all hear the term apparatchiks. It means apparatus worker. And they were those who were working on behalf of the apparatus, because that was the name that the Communist Spy Network had for themselves in the United States. They called themselves the apparatus or the organization. Once upon a time, they referred to themselves as the Igale. It's quite ironic because we're talking about illegals crossing the border, but that's what the word Igale means. It means illegals. So the Soviet spy network in the United States simply referred to themselves as the illegals. So, it's just not as simple as people are making it out to be. This growing utopianism and this lack of critical, analysis on behalf of a lot of people who call themselves conservatives, I guess, is just strange. It really is.
Right. And I would say this too. If abolishing the FBI, if the reason would be because it's not perfect, then why would it stop? Like, why would the abolishing stop? It would be the FBI. Then next, it would be they wouldn't stop abolishing these organizations until they were all gone. And then you'd be left with what? You'd be left with a dictatorship. Like,
exactly, man. Exactly. Right. So yeah, man. If we had a J. Edgar Hoover, we may be better off as a country if we had someone like him, man, in the FBI.
Right.
And Vivek Ramaswamy, look what he did to MLK. Vivek Ramaswamy, he knows what he's doing when he says stuff like that. He knows exactly what he.
Are you telling me, Chuck, that Vivek Ramaswamy is a plant? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I don't know, man. Cat Williams, man. I gotta go.
all right, Chuck. All right,
y'all
Chuck.
be easy, man. I'll see y'all tomorrow.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't know.
He's a plant. He's a. Yeah.
I think so too. I mean, the thing about Vivek, it's the same with him as it is with Dinesh and Gorka and others. These are men with platforms. They have pretty large platforms. They have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who are listening to the things that they have to say. People who call themselves conservatives, and they're using their platforms to say abolish the FBI. There's no thought that goes into it. There's no wisdom that goes into it. It's just a matter of, here's how it's trending. Here's what people think. Let me feed into that. Let me sensationalize off of that. If they were honest and if they were wise, they would understand the usefulness of the FBI as a mechanism to use its resources to understand radical movements that wish to use agitation and violence, and in many cases, to try to undermine the Constitution and to weaponize public opinion against their own best interests. Those organizations exist. They exist, and they are to be taken seriously. And the fact is, you don't have the resources as an individual living in the United States. Not only that, you're influenced, whether it be through your education, through your television screen, and all the others, to fall prey to the kind of propaganda that is being used by these organizations and these programs and these ideologies to get you even to operate against your own best interests. And so what J. Edgar Hoover was able to demonstrate, in my opinion, and based upon my research, is that the FBI should be used as an institution to understand these radical movements, to inform the public of these radical movements, and do what they can to stop these radical movements from destroying our country. This is the fact. To the extent that you have individuals who are installed within the FBI by uber partisan leftists, such as Barack Obama and Donald Trump, or not Donald Trump, but Joe Biden and others. If your concern is that the FBI is being utilized not to preserve the Constitution, but rather to go after your favorite, conservative or Republican politicians, your talking point should be, as a Republican or conservative pundit, to say, look, the next president that we elect should ensure that we are getting rid of these leftist communist ideologues from the FBI, get rid of them, and replace them with people who believe in the Constitution and are going to abide by the Constitution and going after those who wish to destroy our country. That should be the talking point, but it's not. The talking point is abolish. And you sound no different than the left. Even old girl, Brianna, or whatever her name is, Brianna Gay Joy or something like that. Even she said, yeah, look, they agree with us now. We should seize upon this opportunity to really push for the abolishing of the FBI. In a sense, what she's saying is, let's seize this opportunity to get rid of a mechanism that exists to investigate our efforts to destroy the country. Let's get rid of them. It's the same thing as, what Blanche and I talked about a month or so ago, where you have these criminals who want to get rid of the police. The police are a mechanism to get rid of criminal activity in our neighborhoods and in our communities. So of course the criminal has a vested interest in seeing to it that nobody is there to arrest them when they do their mess. And so it would stand to reason that the communist doesn't want an organization like the FBI to exist to investigate their radical agenda. And so that we shouldn't abolish the FBI. We should reform it to get rid of people who do have an agenda against our Constitution and replace them with individuals who want to conserve and preserve our Constitution. It's as simple as that. It's just as simple as that in my mind. What do you think, Blanche?
I think it's difficult because of the culture and the language. And so if Vivek Ramaswamy says that let's get people in there that want to uphold the Constitution, the average person mind thinks white, conservative, Republican, because things like upholding the Constitution, protecting the Constitution is not really a left liberal thing. They want to get rid of the Constitution. So I just think that the problem now is it's such a culture war that people like you and Chuck would have to be advisors to these people. They would have to have people around them that were well versed in even how to speak to the general public. How can I say this and not sound like I'm a racist or not sound like I'm against everybody that's not quote unquote on the right? How can I make this sound more appealing? And the problem is, I don't think you can, because abolishing the FBI sounds like abolishing the police. And it does, because think about the culture that was created with black people and drug, the feds and black folks in selling in the drug era, in the height of the crack era. It was just their greatest enemy was the feds. Like, the feds come kicking down, you know what I'm saying? So there's already a culture in place that is anti-FBI. So how do you even change that?
Right.
I don't know how you do it. They say the DOJ, but the FBI is under the DOJ. That's why even the left even says the DOJ. They don't say the feds. They say they use another word for you to not make you think that it's that. So again, Chad, what I'm saying is it's really a culture war that we're fighting against people, because the average person doesn't understand what's even being said. They hear MLK, they hear the feds, okay, yeah. So, okay, bad, okay, they're bad. You might come in the room and suck the air out because you're going to say, no, this right here, A, B, C. They're going to be like, nah, no. MLK was done wrong. Malcolm X done wrong. That's what we're going with. So right. I know the FBI is necessary. I think all of them are necessary. I think the issue is who's in charge of these organizations. That's the problem. Just like if I got a missile in my garage, it's useless, it's harmless. But if I get somebody to fire it for me, now I can start calling some shots. So again, it's not the organizations, it's the people that are controlling them. And now we see, like old girl said, this is our time to seize the moment to get rid of all accountability. So once you get rid of the feds, I mean, you pretty much it's almost be like a free for all, like Chuck said back, during the Prohibition days.
Right. What a mess. I'm actually gonna have to have you and Chuck back when we can go longer and talk about like what, because I'm a small government guy. I do believe the government should be smaller, but I think we should operate with wisdom when it comes to which agencies and components of the federal government should stay and which should go. If it is truly our intention to get back to the edicts of the Constitution, and that's the place from which we're starting, the question then becomes which agencies are out of step with that and which agencies are consistent with that. Not consistent insofar that they have a track record of preserving the Constitution or operating within the confines of the Constitution, but a track record in terms of when you look at what their purpose is or what purpose they are supposed to serve in theory, like the FBI, I do think, once again, that you don't have a nation unless you have agents within that nation, within the government of that nation, who are tasked or charged with seeing to it that you don't have domestic or foreign enemies who are systematically going about efforts to undermine that Constitution and to overthrow that nation or overthrow that government. You need to have people in place to operate to that end. Because again, when it comes to the American people, on the one hand, we just don't have the knowledge that these agencies are capable, like the information that they're capable of gathering, for one. And for two, I don't think that many of us are interested in using our using our voices and using our vote to preserve the edicts of the Constitution, because we once again are being systematically indoctrinated against our own best interests. As eloquent and as articulate as Ronald Reagan sounded in that clip, he was flat out wrong and naive. And my concern is that today, many of us, the majority of us, are operating with some degree of naivete and thinking that we get rid of the government or we get rid of these certain agencies in the government and we can handle it ourselves. We've proven that we can't handle it ourselves. We're not interested, and we're miseducated to the point that we can't do it ourselves. So we need to have people in leadership who are doing this. Now, I'm not an anarchist. I'm simply not an anarchist. So I don't believe that we should just get rid of the government. I don't believe that for a second. I know a lot of people do, but I'm not one of them. The Bible says that God has given the government the sword for a reason. God said, the Bible talks about how it is God who have established these governments and all these things. And so we might not be able to see at the ground level, from a two-dimensional level, the purpose of this government or that government, or this government's oppressive or that government's oppressive. How does God have anything to do with this or that? We might not be able to see it from the ground level, but when you what's the word I'm looking for? When you defer to God's wisdom and you trust that he sees the big picture, that he's omniscient, then you begin to understand, okay, I might not understand it here and now, but at the same, but I can understand and trust God's providential will, and that he has a purpose in this. And so far, or so long as you have a right as a citizen to vote and to be informed and to educate yourself and all the things, the question becomes, how will you utilize that vote? Will you utilize it recklessly and giving your vote to demagogues like Vivek Ramaswamy, who's just telling you what your itching ears want to hear? Or will you operate a little bit more prudently and move a little bit more wisely in terms of asking the question, okay, if Vivek is saying that we should get rid of the FBI because they surveyed and looked into Martin Luther King, who, by the way, was a communist. Make no mistake about it. This man was a communist. And you're upset with him because you've allowed yourself, or you're upset with J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI because you've allowed yourself to take as narrative or as gospel a narrative that you've been sold by your public school. You have to ask yourself the question, well, have I been indoctrinated to believe things that go against my own best interest? I'm not saying that the FBI is perfect, but you're not going to have a perfect government. You're not going to have perfect government agency. That's just not a thing that's going to happen. But I'll take it back to the question that Blanche asked. Like, what do you replace it with? And will that thing be any better? I would venture to say no, because you'll still have men who are sinful and wicked at heart who are operating these things. J. Edgar Hoover wasn't a perfect man. I seriously doubt that he was a homosexual. There's no evidence of it. But I do believe that Martin Luther King was a homosexual. Because I've seen evidence of that. So I can only operate off of what I see evidence of. And I don't see any evidence of J. Edgar Hoover. But the thing is, like, again, anybody who listens to me know that I don't really spend a lot of time opining about Martin Luther King's, like, the dirty, greasy stuff that he did behind closed doors. I think it's repulsive, especially for a man who calls himself a reverend. But I don't spend a lot of time talking about that. I talk a lot about his communism and his heretic beliefs. That's what I talk more about, because that's what I'm more interested in. Because y'all celebrate him and place him on a pedestal, but the fact is, you're placing an idea of who he was, or a falsified myth of who he was, not who he actually was. So that's why I talk about that. That's why I talk about the things that I talk about as it relates to Martin Luther King. And I think that J. Edgar Hoover was right to go after him, to look into who he was and what he was up to. And I make no apologies for that. So,
you know what's funny, Chad, is that if people had to choose, you exposing him being a communist or you exposing him being a womanizer, they would pick the latter. They would pick the exposing the womanizer, because that is something they don't have to deal with. If he's a communist, they got to deal with a whole bunch of stuff internally. But if he's just a womanizer, they'll either justify it or just give it an excuse. But what you're talking about, not focusing on the juicy gossip, is what really has people upset, because they can't argue against it. And so what we're seeing now is folks trying to find a way around America's most beloved hero. We're talking about Martin Luther King is America's most beloved saint. I would say even more than JFK. How do you reconcile with the fact that your beloved saint was a communist? Like how can the average person say, how do we fall for this person? That should let the average person know of how clever the enemy is, how deceptive, how cunning, that they have you worshiping somebody that is a or was a communist. There's over 1,000 streets named after MLK in America. Over 1,000. So just think about America as a country. Think about a communist doing a time travel from back then coming to the future, and seeing how America has immortalized communists. Like, they'd be like, we did it. Like, you know, and then looking at Biden and Kamala in office, I mean, like, they'd be like, we won. But again, Chad, this is what I mean by the language. 4 years ago, I wouldn't have known. I remember when I was reading BLM's mission statement, and I noticed that their first paragraph was in big bold letters, but all the subsequent paragraphs were in smaller letters. So it started saying, BLM was started because Trayvon Martin, and then it got into the juicy stuff, talking about trans and leadership and get rid of the family and doing the social justice work as a full-time job. And but then there was a word, it was like comrade or something. I was like, comrade? I was like, why would they use a Russian word? My mind not even understanding but I look up comrade, I'm like, wait a minute. So then the whole ceiling falls on me, like, wait a minute. So then you start realizing, and so it's even the language. When you hear stuff like dismantle, deconstruct, abolish, all these terms are really communist terms. Because think about it, that's what they want to do. They want everything destroyed to create a new, but their new quote unquote utopia is going to have us in bondage. But for some reason, popular culture thinks that communism isn't bad because most of the famous communist leaders are immortalized. They're on T-shirts. They get praised. So it's hard selling communism as a bad thing. And with the FBI, I know the feds already have a bad name. So what the communists have managed to do is, again, they have their tentacles all throughout the culture. And I just don't know, like you say, public school, to me, the greatest act of revolution in this quote unquote believers crusade is not having your child in public school.
Right.
Because that public school education set me back about 20 years just with the indoctrination and the not, just, I'll admit it, like I was clueless about what was going on because school teaches you that good is bad and bad is good in terms of our political history.
But that's a display of wisdom on your part, though. I mean, Blanche, the fact that you are willing to acknowledge that you were wrong because you were lied to, and the fact that you are in pursuit of the truth, and that the fact is, Jesus said that my sheep know my voice and they listen to me. Mm-hmm. That's what Jesus says. He said, my sheep know my voice and they listen to me. So unfortunately, many of us, we don't know the truth if it slaps us in the face. We would rather believe all the lies that we've been told. This whole concept of being born again is very important, and I think it's more important than people realize. What does it mean to be born again? I mean, Jesus explains what it means to be born again. He says you were born, he tells Nicodemus, you were born of natural parents who taught you natural lessons. They were doing the best they can. They taught you natural lessons. But he says, because Nicodemus says, well, am I to go back into my mother's? Like, no. He says you were born of natural parents who taught you natural lessons. And basically the whole concept of being born again means dying to this natural world and becoming a new creature, one of God's making, being led by the Holy Spirit and sanctified on a daily basis, repenting on a daily basis. And so the whole concept of being born again means putting off the old and being born anew. And there's a lot of us who call ourselves Christians, who run around calling ourselves Christians, who aren't born again because we still believe the natural things taught to us, whether they be in school, in media, and from our own parents in many cases. We reject lies as born again believers. We reject the lies and we choose this day forward to believe the truth. The Bible says that you should know the truth and the truth will make you free. It shall make you free. And I genuinely feel free. I feel free because I'm not in bondage or captivated by lies, whether those lies are of MLK, whether those lies are whatever, fill in the blank. I feel free enough to be my own man who's led by the Holy Spirit. And so this is the reason why the things that I say, you say, Chuck say, Keisha say, these are the reason why it's so jarring to people, because we are, in a sense, not towing the line of all the things that we've all learned, because we all had the same basic upbringing. We all went to the same schools. We all went, listened to the same songs, watched the same movies. And these things served a function of instilling within us a way of thinking that we've broken free from. We're free. And one thing the devil hates is a man who's truly free, who's been set free by the truth of Christ. And so, again, Jesus also said, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God. We know that anarchy is demonic. You know what I mean? Like, we know that to be true. I'm not totally against a monarchy. I'm not totally against it, because when you review world history, what you find is that you had some kings who were good kings, who were wise and noble kings, and their kingdoms thrived as a result of their wisdom, and as a result of them being about peace and prosperity, and ruling, just being a good ruler. You had other kings who were wicked and who were destructive, and whose kingdoms failed as a result. And so it came down to who was it that was ruling at a given time. You can't throw out monarchy altogether. You have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. And so what man concluded is that, well, we don't like monarchies, and so let's install something else, like a democracy, depending on what country you're talking about, or a republic, depending on other countries like ours. We are a republic. And the idea behind the republic is that you have representative government, localities sending to Washington, D.C., or sending to their state legislatures individuals who they approve of. And what they envisioned was a society that runs better because it's the people who are putting these people in power, not so much somebody who inherits power because their dad was king or something of this nature. In a democracy, you have the same thing, only it's not so much a representative republic where you have different localities who are operating with some degree of sovereignty at the local and state level. A democracy is kind of like a monarchy light, insofar that you're not necessarily inheriting power from your dad. The whole people are coming together, and by a simple majority, you have somebody installed in power. It operates different. I don't have time to get into the intricacies of a democracy versus a republic, but the result is the same: people electing their rulers. And the fact of the matter is, it hasn't proven to be that much better than the best monarchies we've seen in human history.
Right.
If we're being honest with ourselves, I don't think this is a conversation that most people are having. We just assume that a republic is better because we live in one. We happen to have been born in one. But I don't think many of us have thought long and hard about different forms of government and how people have or have not prospered under said such governments. And so at the end of the day, with all of my whimsical musing, what is it that I'm saying? Well, what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, it comes down to the people. It comes down to man and the hearts of man. Whether you live under a monarchy, a republic, democracy, communism, free market enterprise, doesn't matter. At the end of the day, these are people we're talking about. And the success or failure of a government system has more to do with the people than with the ideology in itself. Now, we criticize communism a lot because it's a demonic ideology. It just is. And the fact of the matter is, although a free market enterprise is not perfect, it's a hell of a lot better than a communist utopia, or I would say dystopia. But in the system that we have, as American citizens, we have the ability to elect our representatives in Congress. And not only do we have the power to elect them, we have the voice and the ability to determine how they rule and how they lead, which includes the people that they establish in such agencies as the FBI. And so why are we not advocating Dinesh D'Souza, Sebastian Gorka, Vivek Ramaswamy? Why are we not advocating that the people who we elect to be president or whatever utilize their platform, utilize their power to install individuals within these agencies who will respect and adhere to the Constitution? Why are we not advocating for that? Why are we sounding just like the left when we say abolish them? Why is that? Again, I feel like there's so much noise. There's so much brainless chatter that it's almost you know, like people like me kind of get discouraged to say anything, because it's like it's such a steep uphill battle to try to correct it or to try to speak the truth, because it's like so many people just believe wrongly. I'm not saying that I have all the facts, but again, I use as my North Star what the Bible says, and I have a lot of respect for the Constitution, and I just hate to see this country destroyed because people don't think. So, Blanche, I'll give you the last word.
Well, I just want to say one thing real quick, though. I just think it's disingenuous for people to bring up the fact that something's not perfect. On one hand, everybody says nobody's perfect, but when it comes to an organization, it has to be perfect. It's just insane to me. There's a park in a city somewhere that's ran down and looks horrible. Like it's like nothing is perfect anywhere. It's just how it is. But I think it's just to me, it's a liberal criteria when you don't want things to get done, when you want to not have any accountability. You say if it's not perfect, then we want to get rid of it, abolish it. And again, what is the alternative is what I always ask. And people think they have all the answers until they're sitting there suffering from the decisions that they made or something that they created. I don't think, when I hear Vivek, you mentioned something that was very powerful. You mentioned wisdom. So when I listen to a man speaking, it's different than somebody saying something that people agree with versus someone speaking with wisdom. Most of the time, if you're saying something and the whole room agrees with you, you're probably lying. And it's just the end of it, because if I put you on stage right now in front of the country, it's going to start a riot. If you start out just talking about what's really going on, it's going to start a riot. Like think about our show on a national stage. It's going to start an uproar because what we're saying is going to challenge what people have been force-fed and believe. It's going to so I would say that if there are candidates and people are able to sit in a room with them and have just a happy time, there's no conviction there because you're not really speaking the truth. And so we have to have governing bodies. Like if we're the people, if we're truly a republic, then we decide who those governing bodies are. It's our responsibility to say we want these folks and hold them accountable. Think about it. With the FBI in place, CIA in place, with all these things in place, BLM still happened. Like all this stuff still, like all of the stuff we see today still happened under their watch. So again, I'm saying, what would it be without the watch? Like what would happen if we didn't have it? Could you imagine if we didn't have any consequences for all this nonsense? It'd be utter chaos. But to me, that's what they want, because the devil can thrive in confusion. God exists in order, and so what I'm hearing when I hear abolish the FBI, I hear abolish, like I don't, he doesn't sound any different than what I heard summer 2020 and 2021, abolish the police, and I'm like, and do what with them? And replace them with what? Federal marshals? Like, what are you going to replace them with? Because you're still going to have crime. So again, these folks are disingenuous, Chad. You brought another good point when you said, do they even care? To me, Chad, caring about what we're talking about right now is going to disrupt your life to a degree, because you're going to have to worry about a life for your children. You're going to have to change the way you talk. You're going to have to change what you do. You're going to have to think. You're going to have to do all these things. And you're going to have to consult with God. You have to sit down and be humble and pray for wisdom and pray for understanding. And so, again, what we're talking about, because it's the truth, is going to require a total life change. And I don't think folks are not just ready for that, but even willing to do that. Because, again, if you learn the truth about MLK and you still want to hold on to the lie, then guess what? That makes you no better than any bad person we ever had in history. To hold on to the lie makes no difference than any evil king that we've ever seen, ruler or dictator that we've ever seen in history. You holding on to the lie makes you just like them. And so to me, the lie is comfortable for people. And so when I listen to you and Chuck talk about this stuff, I'm just like, man, this stuff is literally, when you were talking, Chad, I was envisioning, I'm not lying to you. I'm envisioning when you was talking, those pods on the Matrix? Mm-hmm. You said like how it's not that many people. Like it's like you said it was an uphill battle and you like going against so much. I look at that movie, The Matrix, and think about it. What Morpheus is saying to people is equivalent to you saying MLK is communist. Like, just imagine you're sitting in a room with him and he's saying, all this right here is not real. What you mean it's not real? No, it's not real. Your hero is not your hero. So to me, that's what it actually is. It's a literal breaking people out of a matrix. Think about just the MLK thing. Just MLK shatters the whole world changes. Because now you're like, wait, if MLK ain't real, what about this person? What about this person? What about it? The rabbit hole never stops. And so I just think, Chad, that you and Chuck and Keisha and even myself are more like what they were on the Nebuchadnezzar in the Matrix. It's a small crew, and they were going around freeing people. I mean, guess what? They weren't freeing groups. They was going one pie at a time. And right. you know what I'm saying? So it's just, I mean, we got to just trust God, and that's just the mission, But look at, you might say somebody like Neo, though, that can bring down the communist machine. I don't know, but I'm just saying that's what it seems like to me when you were talking, that we're like that. That it's not that many of us. But I look at the Bible, Chad, and God never used a whole bunch of people. Right, God used to do great things. It never was a large group of people. And so to me, I think because our foundation is God, Christ, the truth. That's what makes what we do more powerful. Like I told you, some of your monologues you do that go viral, it's because people are able to hear what you're saying without any distractions. There's no competing narrative. There's no propaganda. It's just you speaking. So now guess what? If somebody gets the truth in their face with no distractions, almost like you got trapped into a chair, they got to receive it. Like it's no choice, so.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, and that's actually encouraging, because I do get, and I'm sure you do too, but I do get DMs from people who say, well, wow, I never thought about that, but you make it make so much sense, and I'm really learning a lot. So again, I don't claim to have all the answers. I genuinely don't. I don't want to be anybody's leader. I'm not trying to be the next Martin Luther King or anything like that. Like, again, I just want to tell the truth for truth's sake, and hope that people will be led to do their own research, but also just to pursue Christ. At the end of the day, that's genuinely what I want. We had a super chat from asking to come up earlier, so shout out to Chuck.
Chad, but I will say this, Chad. I will say that my faith walk, I guess, made me more open to the truth. If that makes sense. Like the closer I got to Christ, the more I was like, I wasn't offended anymore. I was, willing to, like, I don't know, it's just like it changes your, the spirit, man, starts to grow, and right. you start, you start seeing things for what they are. And so to me, I think it's almost paramount for you to have Christ in this conversation, because a person won't be able to even receive this stuff without that, in my opinion. Some people may, but to grasp the full concept, you're going to have Christ.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. I think that, and not to cut you off, but I think that what politics have done to us as a society is made us think that all of the answers to our problems can be solved with a vote, can be solved with an elected official who is pushing certain policies that are aimed at addressing the issues that we have individually and as a society. And that notion couldn't be any further from the truth. What politics have caused us to do is to not look at ourselves and the problems that we have in ourselves. This is certainly true of so-called black culture. The fact that black culture is able to run amok and to be degenerate and disgusting is because we believe that politics will solve our problems. And all we have to do is vote for the next, Democrat official or what have you, and they will make things better for us time and again. And then, of course, between elections, we complain the Democrats aren't doing enough. We should withhold our vote next time, only to vote 90+% for them again the next time. That's not to say on the flip side of that, the Republicans are the answer. What I'm trying to communicate to you all is that most of the problems that you have cannot and will not be addressed within the political realm. It just won't. These are spiritual problems. There's spiritual warfare at play. Mm-hmm. And unless and until you repent and turn to Christ, you'll always be confused. You'll always be angry. You'll always be bitter. I can sit here for 3 hours and talk about cultural stuff, political stuff, and not be angry. I might be bewildered. I might be confused or disgusted about some of the stuff that we're talking about, but I'm not angry. Why? Because I'm free. I'm free in Christ. Who the Son sets free is free indeed. I genuinely believe that. And so, again, while it's my responsibility still as a citizen to vote and to use my civic responsibility responsibly, I don't believe for a second that my problems as it relates to my business, as it relates to my family, as it relates to me as an individual, can be solved within the political arena. And furthermore, it takes away the fact that we need to, as a people and as individuals, self-reflect as often as we can. We don't do a lot of self-reflection. We believe that our problems are somebody else's fault. Even with the border crisis, yes, I believe that the border should be locked up, but even still, I don't think that even with the border thing that we're doing enough self-reflection on an individual level. Our problem isn't the immigrants. I can guarantee you that. Even though we should lock the border up, the problem is us. We are the problem. And we have yet to come to that conclusion. And so politics gives us a reason or an excuse to believe that our problems is somebody or something else. And for this reason, we're going to continue to spiral downhill. So I didn't mean to cut you off though, Blanche.
No, I wouldn't. And you say that, and to me, that's no different than Karl Marx saying that the greatest problem with humanity is the class struggle. Mm-hmm. It's still taking it off the onus of the individual, the person. It's saying your problems are because there's different classes. Other side says, well, the problem really is politics. We need to vote better people in office. Neither one of them are talking about the individual man or the individual woman. And you said self-reflection, and that should be done every single day. This is how I know God's word is real and it's the truth. I know it because the Bible says take up your cross daily. Mm-hmm. Taking up your cross daily is a self-examination. You're always saying, how can I do better? Where did I miss the mark? You go into God saying, Lord, give me the strength to be better. I want to be a better leader. I want to be a better father, be a better husband, be a better person. You're always trying to be better, and you're always humbling yourself and asking Christ for help. And so, yeah, it's the same thing of not taking ownership and responsibility. And I told somebody the other day, I said, the immigration problem that we have is our fault. I said, because this whole time, I said, we've been decadent. I said, the fact these folks want to come over here lets you know that it's us. They shouldn't even want to come over here. They should be like, those people over there are not going to fool with us if we go over there. Cause you know what I mean? You know what I mean, Chad?
Right.
Like we make it seem like it's just decadent. So yeah, I'm coming on. I'm about to walk home. I'm going to sneak. Yeah, I'm coming. So to me, I said, it's our fault. I said, all these years we talking about, yeah, let them come over. Who's America's this? Just this attitude we had. But guess what? Not realizing, Chad, that the alternative is worse. The alternative to what folks are proposing is going to be worse. My cousin called me up a couple of years ago when she was celebrating. She said Trump's about to get locked up. She was celebrating on the phone, cheering, just happy. I said, he ain't getting locked up, you know. He get it. This time he is going. And I told her, I said, the same thing that will make you laugh will make you cry. I said, be careful what you are celebrating for. A couple of months later, called up slanging snot. Oh, my job said I got to take a shot. I hate Biden. Oh, my God. I said, I told you. I said, I told you. Because everybody thinks that the grass greener on the other side. The grass ain't never greener. You know why?
Right.
Because you still got to water it. You still got to cut it. It still requires maintenance. The grass ain't never greener. It's still going to require work. So just because you get somebody in office, your job now gets harder because now you got to hold them accountable. And folks don't want to do that. And the issue is it ain't these organizations, it's us holding people accountable. But guess what, Chad? How can you hold an organization accountable when you can't look in the mirror and hold yourself accountable? So, you know what I'm saying? So that's why we having this problem. You can't look in the mirror.
Exactly. Yeah, we need to do a lot more self-reflection. Shout out to AK News. I see him in the chat. Miss Ree, J07. Love the super chat, says amen. Thank you, Miss Ree. Appreciate it. And then Stimulated Students, love the super chat, says waiting on Chuck's breakdown of Vietnam. Yeah, that should be a good one. Should be a very good one. We'll be back tomorrow evening, folks. On Cutting Through the Culture, we're going to be doing a part 2 of last week's show. Keisha's going to be with us next time, so I'm looking forward to having her input in the conversation. We're going to have a couple new clips in the montage, minus the clips that we already went over last week. So yeah, it would be interesting to have a female's perspective on the whole question of the topic that we covered last week. Earlier in the day, tomorrow, I think like at 3 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be on Dana's channel. Those of you who are watching might remember whenever Blanche and I went live with Dana over the legacy of James Baldwin. So she invited me to come onto her channel and to discuss whether Black History Month is needed or not. So,
oh no!
So I'm going to be on
that. Oh my God!
By the way, I don't think it should be called Black History Month, because when you look at Black History Month and the fact that this is a month that is utilized to parade in front of you all of these communists, these black communists, I think it should be called Black Fistory Month instead of Black History Month. So, Black Fistory Month. So, so yeah, I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow evening. And if you have any ideas about some things that we should cover on CTTC in the future, just feel free to put them in the comment section or email me about them. So,
hold on, Chad. What's Dana's channel? What's her channel?
The Real Dana. Yeah, The Real Dana. So be on the lookout for that. It's going to be me, her, and then some PhD leftist. So that should be an interesting conversation. They should get Blanche. I think Blanche should go on there instead of me. To be honest with y'all, Blanche
but Chad, you know she gonna think that Black
I'm
history
apparently too nice. What'd you say?
You know she gonna think Black history is necessary. You know she gonna be all. She gonna have all of the commercial talking points. Just the we got it. But Chad, can I ask you a question before we go? What has been the benefit of Black people knowing this so-called Black history? Like how has it benefited Black folks in any type of way?
It's been more detrimental than beneficial. I can tell you that. Who was it that started Black History Month? It used to be Black History Week, and then it became History Month. G. Woodson.
Yes, Carter G. Is it
Carter G. Woodson? Yeah, Carter G. Woodson. Which he had some interesting things to say. I think he was more of a leftist than a conservative, but even he in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, acknowledged the fact that a lot of your black youngsters who are going off to college are being turned into communists by their professors. So even he acknowledged that. Yeah, and The Miseducation of the Negro. I'll share the page with you. Do I have it here?
Goodness, he said that?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, I don't have it behind me though. Yeah, I'll share with you, Blanche, the exact page. But anyway, I look forward to seeing y'all all tomorrow on Cutting Through the Culture. Good night and God bless.